Today, I'd like to take a look at the second part of the synodal summary from the Synod on Synodality, that the first phase of which recently completed on October 29th in the Vatican. The second part is entitled All Disciples, All Missionaries. So from that title, we get the obvious conclusion that all of us are involved in this missionary church of ours. One of the temptations to be resisted that the synodal summary speaks about is clericalizing the laity. The importance of not doing that, in making certain lay leaders to be like the new clerics. The church is trying to get away from clericalism and be a more synodal church. The image of the clericalism is that, the cleric dominates. The cleric is the authority. The cleric talks and gives all the conclusions, and we just bow down to the clerics. Well, lay leaders can become the new clerics. There's a shortage of clergy. Many lay people have degrees in theology and have certain positions in the church. They can become like the new clerics and resist the synodal process, resist listening to others, being open to others, sitting down and being in dialogue with others. And that is the temptation to clericalize the laity. The importance of people with disabilities in missionary activities is pointed out. And a very neglected resource many times, that people with disabilities are sort of on the margins, kind of excluded. But who better to minister to people who have disabilities than people with disabilities, who understand what the people are going through? So they are really a great treasure in the church, a great resource that has been largely untapped, the Synod proclaims. The importance of women in the church is highlighted in this section. Increased responsibility for women. Women have such a crucial role in the church, and it's a role that unfortunately has not been promoted as it should be. And so there was a lot of dialogue, a lot of discussion about that, and certainly raises the issues of women deacons, women priests, all of these concepts, but certainly increased role of women. And women for the first time were voting members of the Synod. Many more women attended the Synod, and certainly the Synod is wanting to get our church to move in that direction of being more inclusive of the roles of women. And there's a great, I think, excitement about that, but also impatience to see it develop more fully. The Synod proclaims that we are a church of wounds, and one of those churches is machismo, the idea of the male ruling, and certainly major criticism of the church. And the Synod acknowledges that and says we have to certainly deal with that. There should be no subordination of women. They should not have a lesser role. They must have an equal role in every respect. There should be no exclusion of women from any of the ministries or any of the aspects of the church. And there should be no competition between men and women in terms of the church. The idea of women deacons was raised, and that certainly is an important issue. It's being referred for more reflection. 2 commissions have been established, and one of the requests was that the material from those commissions be released to the general public so that people can read it and understand the debate and where it is presently in the church. And there's a kind of a back and forth in terms of should they have a kind of a clerical role, should they be ordained? So there's a great discussion that is going on about this issue, and it is to be continued. There's not a level of consensus at this point, but the dialogue must be continued as part of the synodal process. The unequal remuneration in terms of men and women in in terms of the church ministries. Many times the religious sisters are viewed as cheap labor. And so that has to be addressed in terms of fairness, really. The obstacle of clericalism. Sometimes the concept is power and not service. And so what the church is really calling us to is to see all of us involved really in service. But particularly in terms of clerics, that the concept must be how are they serving. The idea of clerical celibacy was raised, and it has been raised at several of the synods before, particularly the synod on the Amazonia, but certainly raised again, and much discussion, listening, dialogue, and to be continued, really. That this is certainly an important issue, an issue that certainly is reflected in the Eastern churches, where celibacy is, optional for the priest prior to ordination. Diaconal ministry was also raised, and the idea of many questions concerning it. It's a relatively new phenomenon in the church in terms of the permanent deacon versus the transitional deacon, who is receiving that order on the way to the priestly orders. But now with the permanent deacons, has that been successful? What are some of the pluses and minuses? Must be studied more carefully. One of the main criticisms is that it has not been really a ministry of service. It's been more of a liturgical ministry. And sometimes deacons are seen as alternative priests. So a lot of questions with regard to that ministry and how it can be improved and sharpened and clarified. And that, of course, relates then to women being deacons. How would this whole diaconal ministry work in terms of more service to people rather than just a liturgical aspect to that ministry? Also, the idea of presbyters who've left the ministry on a case-by-case basis, how that could be evaluated and how they could be used in terms of the ministry of the church. Many of these men who have left are still very alive in their faith and have a lot to share. And how can their gifts be incorporated into the ministry of the church that was raised at the synod? Bishops must be an example of synodality. It's very important that they get the message. And to be honest, many of them have not. So it's a huge change for them. They're not used to this. The idea of listening and discerning with their lay flock. Many do not have consultative bodies. Many are the last word and everything, and that's it. So this whole synodal process in terms of the bishop must be looked at and certainly improved and worked on. And for all of us, not just bishops. Certainly this is new to the entire church. There must be a culture of accountability, and this must be sharpened in the church. The lack of accountability has led to disasters in the church. The priest abuse crisis, of course, the number one, but many other in terms of financial irregularities, in terms of abuse of power. So this lack of accountability is an ongoing issue. The synod certainly raised it, discussed it, but it's going to be an ongoing discussion in the church. Making a diocesan pastoral council mandatory, not making it optional, but making it mandatory, was suggested. A lot of times there are no pastoral councils on the local level, on the diocesan level, and the importance of them. And the idea that they should really be functioning and keep the parish and the diocese alive. It shouldn't be dependent on a pastor. It shouldn't be dependent on a bishop. These councils must function effectively and take into consideration the input of all of the faithful. They should be integral in the synodal process. I mean, the synodal process should be led by the pastoral council. Unfortunately, many dioceses it was not, because there was no pastoral council to lead it, and the same in terms of parishes. This is the initiative that must come in, and they must listen to all of the voices, particularly those on the margins, those who have left the church. They must be part of the synodal process. And then I talked about synodality in the Curia and the College of Cardinals, between the Curia and diocesan bishops. All of this must be done in a synodal way so that there is discussion among different members of the Curia, not that they're, supreme over my little branch of the Curia and that's it, but seeing the interrelationship of all of the elements. The same with the College of Cardinals. It's not just an honorific title, it's the idea of us working together in a synodal fashion to discuss how we can make our church stronger. Very important. And the same between the Curia and diocesan bishops. Not that the Curia oppresses diocesan bishops, or the diocesan bishops are not in dialogue with the Curia. All of this in a synodal fashion is very important, to listen to one another, to have the dialogue that is necessary to try to arrive through discernment at a consensus when there are issues that divide, and to work for healing in the church of the different factions that are present in the church. All of that important, and all of it important to be done in a synodal fashion where there is true listening, where there is true dialogue.